All right, let's try this again. Welcome, everybody. This is Mike Potter from Phase 2. I'm the lead architect for the Open Atrium 2 project. And this is our first webinar post DrupalCon. And so I'm going to change the format a little bit this time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time covering the basics of Atrium. We're not going to review terminology and stuff like that. Yeah, if you'd like to, if you're just brand new to Atrium and you would like to get some really more basic information that I don't cover today, after the webinar today, I want to direct you to a couple sources of information. The first one is the Drupal.org project page for Atrium. This is now our main place for the Drupal side of things. And you can see that there's information about version 2 of Open Atrium here. And below that, we have some links to some demos. These are all the webinars that have properly recorded that we've put out on the Vimeo site. So for example, this first one here that says General Open Atrium 2 demo, this is the most kind of general demo. It talks a little bit about what is Atrium and what is collaboration software, how does Atrium fit in the space with other vendors. So if you're kind of a business owner or just brand new to Atrium, that's a good place to start. That's also pretty much a match of the day stage presentation that I gave at DrupalCon. Since they don't record the day stage stuff like they do the other sessions, that's kind of the best place to find that info. And then we have 3 developer demos, which is like what we're going to do today. And these all talk about kind of the general intro to Atrium and what the terminology is. They go into some of the different types of functionality that I'm not going to repeat today. It talks about access control, what is a space, how our subspaces work. So if you just click on one of these, it will take you to the vimeo.com site, and you can then watch the webinar from there. So we try to keep everything on Vimeo updated and posted. Let's close that out. So you can go to our Phase 2 Vimeo site and see what's the latest there. So with that said, let's jump over to a demo. And what I want to focus on today is what's new since DrupalCon. We've added a bunch of new features. It's still in alpha, and alpha means that we're doing a lot of development and still adding a lot of functionality. And then I'll talk a little bit about our future roadmap, and then we'll have a lot of time today for questions, which will be good because we've got a lot of people today. So hopefully I can have this more focused on what you guys want to hear and what you guys want to learn. So let's go over to our Atrium demo. This is our wonderful demo site that we've gotten used to so many times here, our little university. So we've made our university with the physics department, and we have a humanities department and some spaces like that. And within physics, we have sections on the right-hand side here for discussions for students and faculty, and a competition space for a project. So the new stuff I want to show today, the first one is, you noticed I've now marked this space as a private space. In past demos, I've always had this as a public space. And just like with our sections, where we used to go into faculty discussion and it would tell us that this section was private and it could only be seen by the faculty group, you'll notice that space pages now show you privacy. And when a space page is private, what it's showing you here under groups is the kind of parent relationship. It's showing you who we're inheriting membership access from. So this is telling us that anybody who's in the faculty group is going to be automatically a member of this space. And before it didn't show you that. It only showed you either public or private. And if it was private, you didn't get this information. In addition, now when I go to the Members tab, in addition to showing me the direct members, so these members down here, the physics professor and the student, in past demos, we've manually added these members to the space. And we've made the physics professor one of the owners of the space. But now you can also see that it's showing you that it's inheriting members from faculty. And I can click on faculty and I can see the people in that group. And ignore some of the warnings we've got here. This is still the dev release I'm working on today. So we're going to see a few little warning message at the top. But anyway, you see that in the faculty group, we've already got the English professor and physics professor. So I no longer need to have the physics professor listed down here as a direct member. I could remove the physics professor from the space, and the physics professor is still going to have access to this space because it's inheriting their membership from the faculty group. To control the inheritance here, you just edit your space. And we've shown this a little bit briefly when we talked about subgroups in one of our previous demos. But down towards the bottom of the space page, we have a field here called parent spaces, and you can see we've put faculty here. So we can inherit membership from any number of spaces or groups. So you can see when we click the drop down, we see the different spaces on our site. We see the different groups. So we could add students, for example, and that would say that anyone who's a student could also view this page. So in this case, faculty and students, that makes sense. We want both of them to be able to see our physics department. So we'll go ahead and save that. And then we'll see our list update here, and now it's showing us that both faculty and students have access to this space. So that's just going back to how we've worked with the OG subgroups module in terms of supporting a full hierarchy of spaces and groups. So you can set up a group, which is like an access control group of users. You can then assign that group to a space, and you'll inherit membership from that. And then you can assign spaces to create a whole kind of subspace hierarchy. So that, for example, if you wanted a subspace within the physics department, like, maybe you have a geophysics subdepartment, you could have that inherit the membership of physics. And so this takes care of the problem of now you don't have to add people to all these different groups. You don't have to add all your students individually to every single space on your site. You can add it to a single group at the top, a single organization, and let that membership inherit and propagate down. The other change that we're about to make to this is we're splitting the inheritance between regular members and admin members, so that soon in one of the next builds, you'll be able to control whether all members propagate down the tree or whether just regular members or just admins. So the reason for that is you might want to create, for example, a little subgroup of people and put somebody in charge of that group. So you would make them the group admin so they can control adding and removing members. But right now, that admin membership propagates down, so they would automatically become an admin of the physics space. And you might not want your admins of your access groups to also be admins of your spaces. For example, you might want to just let the admins of the group control membership without being able to, for example, customize the pages here. So you'll be able to turn off the propagation of the admins so that the admins do not get inherited down this subgroup tree. So that's just some of the improvements we're making to the subgroup stuff, trying to make that really usable in kind of real life situations. So the next change that we've made is, and this is something that I showed at DrupalCon. So for people that were at DrupalCon, I'm just curious, raise your hand if you actually were at DrupalCon and either saw the day stage presentation or came by the booth and saw one of my demos there or anything like that. We've got 1, 2, looks like just a couple people. Okay, good. So most of this will be new. Well, so if you were lucky enough to be at DrupalCon, I showed some new functionality of Atrium that we shipped or put into the release right before DrupalCon, and that is our whole event calendar system. So we now have a full events plugin for OpenAtrium 2, which I'm sure people using OpenAtrium 1 will be happy to hear about. What it is an event content type and a set of calendar and geocode functionality. So let's dive into that a little bit. What I've done is I've already created a new section within my physics space, and I just called that section the calendar. So if we go to the calendar space, you'll see the default layout of a calendar. So just like other sections, every section can provide kind of a default template for layout. So if I edit this section, when I created it, all I did was over here in the, if we get our server to load, okay. So here's the calendar section I created. When I created it, I just went over here into the layout and I just selected the new calendar section layout. So previously we only had 3 defaults. We had The default layout shows you just the recent activity. The discussion layout shows you discussion posts and a topic list. The news layout shows you articles in kind of a blog format. And now we've got this new calendar section, which is going to show your event and calendar content. So let's go back and take a look at our calendar. You'll see that we've got a monthly view here. I've got a single event created, and obviously this is not when DrupalCon Portland was created here. We've also actually got a bug on this page. It's supposed to be showing us the recent events here on the right-hand side. So I apologize that the event listing isn't there, but let's just go ahead and add it manually ourselves. So we'll customize our page. We'll go to add. And there's so many widgets that come with our event module that we've actually created a separate tab for them here. So under Open Atrium Events, you'll see the various widgets. So there's upcoming events, both large and small, daily, monthly, weekly, detailed lists, just all sorts of different widgets are available here. So let's go ahead and let's add our small upcoming events widget to the sidebar here. So save it, and let's drag it down here and save that as well. Actually, it looks like it's not displaying for some reason. Did this event get put? Let's check our event here and make sure that it got put in the right section of the site. Yep, it says physics and calendar. Okay, well, it looks like we've obviously got a bug in this functionality that worked yesterday but doesn't work today. So here I've edited the event. Let's actually change this. Instead of DrupalCon Portland, let's just say that it's the Open Atrium webinar. And so you've got a description of your event. We've got a start date and end date. We support multi-day events. We've got calendar widgets here, so we could make this a multi-day event. We also support full recurring events. So you click the repeat button, and you can say that this event is going to repeat, weekly, monthly, yearly, daily, every week, repeat on, certain days of the week. Kind of the full functionality that you get with the date module and the calendar module. You can exclude certain dates and everything. So this is really, really rich repeating event functionality. Let's just go ahead and leave this as a single event. Let's go ahead and give it maybe a start time or a different time here. So we started at 11 a.m. and we're going to stop at 12 p.m. All right, so let's go ahead and save this. So that's how you set the time of an event. But we've also got another field on this, which is the location. So what's really important, I think, for people that are doing event calendars these days, you'll see a lot of people implementing event calendars, and all they do is worry about the time. They do all this calendar integration, and they give you the event date and time. But what they don't focus on is events also kind of have a location component to them. So in this case, the demo, I just said Convention Center Portland. That's when I was doing the DrupalCon Denver or the DrupalCon Portland demo. Now let's change this. Let's say that right now we're doing our webinar and we're in Alexandria, Virginia. So that's all we want to put for the location. I don't know what our zip code is. I don't actually necessarily remember what my street address here at the office is, but we don't really care. Let's just put Alexandria, Virginia, and see what happens. So we'll save this. And in the event detail page here, you'll see that we've got a geo map, and it's showing us now a pointer in Alexandria, Virginia. We can zoom out and see that we're really in Virginia here. So what we're doing here is something a little bit more than what we've done in the past. In kind of Drupal 6 in the old days, people were using the location field a lot. And the location field just has a lot of annoying fields. You have to fill in your zip code and your city and your state. And, what if you're an international client? What do you put in for the state? The location, that kind of stuff, it tends to be very kind of US focused, not very usable. In Drupal 7, there's improved solutions now for doing locations, and that's using modules such as GeoField. GeoField works with the geocoder system, so it takes this text field, which is Alexandria, Virginia, and it sends that to Google, and you can change those providers. If you don't want to use Google, you can change that in the configuration. But by default, it's going to go to Google, it's going to send that text, and it's going to get returned a set of longitude and latitude coordinates, which is the geofield coordinates. And then it's going to store those coordinates in your node. So in addition to the text location here, there's another field on this content type, which is the geofield, longitude and latitude. It's just not displaying that, but it's using that geofield to display the Google map. And then this is just using the normal Gmap module. So the advantage of doing it that way is, for one, you don't have to worry about the location. You can kind of put anything in here that you're used to using with Google. It knows locations of places. If you want to put, Mom's Restaurant in Virginia or something like that, Google's able to do that just like it does on Google Maps. But in addition, because you've got that actual longitude and latitude field stored, you can start to do some pretty fancy stuff now on your website. For example, imagine making a view of events where it compares the location, the geolocation of the event, with your location, like if you're on a mobile device, what your actual physical location is. So now you could display a view of nearby events, as an example, that would update as your location updates. And that's functionality that we've never been able to really have in Atrium before. And honestly, you really don't have that in a lot of Drupal implementations, because they're not using these new geofield and geocode modules. So I encourage you to take a look at those modules. They're pretty stable now, and we've got them all bundled together in Atrium and all configured to work well together. The other thing we did is we actually did some patches to those modules to help improve usability a little bit. In addition to physical locations, oftentimes our events now are virtual. Like right now, we're doing this webinar and we're in Alexandria, Virginia physically, but none of you guys are in Alexandria. You're all listening in on this webinar. So often when you want to promote an event, you also want to give kind of the virtual location. So you would say that the webinar is at www.gotomeeting.com, and maybe your code is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, right? So you've got that kind of virtual location. Now, by default, when you save this, it's going to send that whole text field to Google. And now Google's going to get a bit confused. Now, in this case, what happened is it does not understand this anymore as a location. But it kind of gave us the benefit of the doubt, and it just kept the previous geofield untouched. So it did not figure out Alexandria here. It actually didn't set it at all, and this just got left over from before. And we can see that by going down here and saying, let's edit this now. So instead of Alexandria, we're going back to the convention center in Portland. And when we save this, you'll see that it still is going to think that we're in Alexandria. And in fact, it doesn't actually update the map at all in this case. So it doesn't know what to do with this kind of information. And so that's kind of a problem. So we actually added a patch to the geocode module so that lets us do a little alter hook here. So there's now a hook that lets you kind of mess with this data before the geocode sees it, so you can filter out some things. And what we specifically supported is, in your WYSIWYG editor, we're used to having this kind of break line when we're doing our body and summary. You can add a break line now to your location field, and it's only going to look at the stuff before the break when it figures out the geolocation. So now you can see it can properly figure out where the convention center is. So that just gives a lot of flexibility now in using this location field really for any information that you want, not just physical location, but also virtual locations, and yet still being able to support the map in the geofield. So again, really full functioning event module and calendar system here. So in addition to just being able to display the events and do the locations, we also have some import and export functionality. So let's actually go back to that event a minute. And why don't I have it on here? I don't. see the field that I'm looking for here. Let me see if it's over here in this other site so that I can show this to you. It looks like this didn't get updated in my dev build this morning. But normally when you're looking at an event, there's a button that will show up. Oh, that dev site's down too. Okay, well, I can't show that to you today. I'll have to show that to you on the next webinar. There's normally a button next to the subscribe button here that says add to calendar. And what the add to calendar button does is it takes this event as an iCal and it will let you add it to your Google Calendar or your Outlook calendar or just export it as an iCal CSV file. So you can take calendar events from your Atrium site and add them to your existing calendar. And that's there right now. It's just not turned on to display it right now on my page. In addition to be able to kind of export those events, when we go back to the main calendar view, we do have the iCal feed at the bottom. So you can use that to, you can see that it's going to send this WebCal request. So you can use this to launch whatever kind of, put this into whatever kind of feed viewer that you want to do. So that's an iCal feed. And then in addition, we have a way to import. And the way you import events is you go back to your space. And now in your space configuration, there is a new option here called iCal Imports. So you go to iCal Imports. I've created one here already. If you want to create another, you just click here on the Create iCal Importer. But let's just edit the one that I created. I went over to Google and I looked for the iCal feed for their holiday calendar. So I created this feed, I called it Holidays, and then I just put the Google link here. So I'm going to actually copy and paste this down here so you can see what it looks like for real. So I just went to Google and I went to their holiday calendar and I said, give me the iCal link to it, and it puts this stuff here at the end. So then all we do is we save this, and now we click import. The first time you do it, it will automatically do the import. But now I'm going to tell it to re-import because I previously deleted the stuff that it imported the last time. And this is using the feeds module along with the iCal import module. So you can see that it created 87 nodes, 87 events. It put them in the calendar section of the physics group. So we'll clean this up here so that this terminology actually says, what space you're in and so forth. But when you edit that iCal importer, it set that automatically based upon where we came in from. If you ever need to change that, down here under Access is where it shows what space and what section those events are being put into. So, for example, if you have more than one calendar in your space, you could select, which space or which section, which calendar section you wanted to place those events in. But now if we go back and look at the calendar, we'll have some more events. Oh, and right, we did have upcoming events over here, so now we've probably got it twice. Yeah, now we've got it twice. Because obviously today, someone out there was probably screaming at me over the webinar going, Mike, no, it's not appearing because today's the 14th, and you have the webinar here on the 13th. And so sure enough, it's only going to show upcoming events, not all events. So now you can see the widget over here working. We've added these various holidays. Now there's a bug right now in the actual Drupal calendar module that we're investigating to try to patch. When you import full day events, it's setting that full day to be 12 a.m. on one day to 12 a.m. on the next day, which causes the display to have it span 2 days. So we need to update that in the calendar module so that it either doesn't consider that a 2-day event, or maybe when it imports it, it sets it to 11:59 p.m. as the ending time, something like that. So right now, that's why things like Flag Day are showing that it's across 2 days. But you can see that's how we support multi-day events, as it does span it that way. And you can see that we've updated this in here. So we do support, you can set up the rules module to set up schedules. So if you, for example, if you are linking this to your Google Calendar and you wanted to update this on an hourly basis or on a daily basis, you can set up a schedule to do that. Right now, it just comes in as a single import. If you import it again, we are doing matching between the unique event IDs. So if you go and you edit your event in Google, in your Google Calendar, when you come back to Drupal and import that again, you'll get your new edit. It will not create a separate event like it kind of did sometimes in Atrium 1. Atrium 1 had some trouble with generating multiple event nodes instead of just editing current nodes. So that's the full functionality of the event module. A lot more functionality than in Atrium 1, and I think people, at least at DrupalCon, were pretty happy with this. So I hope you guys are excited about that also. So that's events. The next thing I want to show is something else that we had in Atrium 1 that people have been asking about in Atrium 2. In Atrium 1, we were using the Spaces module. The Spaces module in Drupal 6 was a pretty large, kind of clunky module. It did a lot of different things. The two things relevant to Atrium that it did are, first, it let you customize the layout of your spaces or groups in those days. So you could go into your group and you could edit the layout, and it used the context module along with spaces to let you, kind of drag things around your dashboard and customize it. Well, of course, in Atrium 2, we're using panels now for this. So we've got this customized page that you've seen me use here already before. That's when I created this duplicate upcoming events, which I can now remove. This is all the panelizer stuff that we're getting from Panoply. So we no longer need the Spaces module to control our space layout. But the second thing the Spaces module let you do was it let you create different configurations on a per space basis. So for example, you could change the site name for each space or each group. You could change the theme for each space or group. You could basically change any configuration variable that you wanted to on a per space basis. And that was really powerful. Some people use that in their plugins to do a lot of powerful things, to have stuff in different spaces. For example, imagine that you're going to write an integration to an external service, for example, like Google Drive. And so you want a different Google Drive to show files for each different space. So now you're going to need a separate Google Drive login credential for each space. And by default, if you just install one of the Google Drive integration modules for Drupal, it's going to have a single global configuration for your API key or your user authentication, but it's not going to know how to do it on a per space basis. So we wrote a module. It's actually in addition to organic groups. So we've contributed this back to the community. It's called OG Variables. And if you go look at it right now, I think it's just in Atrium. I don't think we've actually posted it as I can find out really quick here by saying project/OG variables. I don't think we've made it a project page yet. Oh, we have. Okay, I take that back. We've already done this. So Hey Fox has been the one working on this one. You guys, a lot of you may know him. So OG Variables is out there as a contrib module. So this will work with any organic groups site. So in particular, this will actually work with Commons or any other distribution that uses organic groups. And what OG Variables lets you do is create configuration variables on a per group, per space basis. So let's just look at see how that works for now. So we'll go to the Drupal admin, and we'll go down to the configuration page and pull up the kind of site configuration here for Drupal. And we'll go down to the organic groups section once my slow server decides to load. There we go. Okay, so here's our Drupal configuration page. Let's scroll down, and we're going to find the organic groups area. And you'll see that one of the organic groups areas is called OG Variables. So we click on OG Variables. And what this is going to show us now is all of the different variables that it can find on the system. So, for example, your theme settings are here, your user settings are here, there's all sorts of different settings, site information, feeds, regional. So these are showing you all the different things that you can change on a per space basis. In particular, you can, if you're creating, for example, a plugin module, you can add your own variables to this. All you need to do is use the variables module. So this is all built around the variables API. The variables API module in Drupal has been around for a long time. It's kind of an extension to the variable get and variable set functions. It lets you kind of define what variables your module uses and give them actual real names and types and so on. So if you're writing modules, I really encourage you to be using the variables API. If you've used the variables API, your variables will automatically show up in this list. So in particular, what I'm going to do here, and I've already actually set it up, is I'm going to go to site information, and I'm going to say that I want to change my site name and even my site email address on a per space basis. So that way, if somebody is in a particular space and they make a post, the email, instead of going to the global site administrator, they'll go to a site administrator email specific to that space. And we can have our space name change as well. So we just click these two boxes. That makes the variables accessible to the OG variables module. Now when I go back to my space, we'll go to the physics space here. And now I want to set a custom value for that variable. So we're going to go to the config page for the space. And so up here we click config. And one of the configurations is variables. So we go to variables. And now it's going to show us all of the variables that we marked that we want to override. So we're only seeing the site information, and we're only seeing the site name and email address. So anything else that I checked back in that global configuration would show up here. So you can control what variables your space owners are allowed to change. So let's just go ahead and say, and I want the site name to say physics department. And we'll save that. And I've got the site name up here in my toolbar. So let's go back to, you can see it already has changed it because it knows I'm in the physics department. The way I got this up here, by the way, is your toolbar in Atrium is customizable. This is a mini panel. And if you go into the mini panels, you can add a bunch of stuff to this using the same kind of customized interface that we get with panels. So all I did was I just added the site title or site name to my toolbar. So you can see it says physics department, but if I go to the humanities department, where it's back to the default, it says Open Atrium 2. So this is getting the default site name, and when I go into physics, it's getting the override of the physics site name. So then it will say physics department. So that's that functionality that people were using the spaces module for. So now we no longer need the spaces module, and we don't plan to use the spaces module at all now in Open Atrium 2. You can use this to change lots of different things. I showed you the theme settings. We don't actually use it right now to change the theme itself. In Drupal 7, changing the theme is a little bit more complicated than just changing a single variable. However, there is already a module out there for organic groups called OG Theme, and I've tested that on Open Atrium and it works just fine. So if you install the OG Theme module, you can actually change your theme on a per space basis. So now you could make the physics department, for example, look completely different than the humanities department or any other space on your site. So that pretty much finishes up the functionality that was in Atrium 1 into Atrium 2, except for the case tracker and shoutbox functionality. And as I've mentioned in past webinars, the case tracker for issue tracking we're leaving to the community. And David Snopek's already got a Work Tracker 2.0 system out there that's linked to the Open Atrium page on Drupal.org for starting a basic work tracker. I expect some other people to have some other issue tracking solutions out there as well eventually. We just realized that issue tracking is really a bigger problem than we want to solve in Atrium Core. We want to leave that to be a contributed plugin so people can install the type of case or issue tracker that they really need for their organization. And then Shoutbox is another kind of thing where, again, that doesn't really belong in the core of Atrium. We'll support plugin modules from the community that add that kind of functionality. So at this point, the Atrium core, which ships with the discussion plugin for discussion threads, the wiki plugin for your knowledge base, which is the old kind of book module replacement, and now the event module for your event calendars. Those are the three core plugins for Atrium. Those are really going to be the only three plugins you see in core Atrium at this point. Everything else is going to come in as a contributed plugin at a later time. Let's see. The last bit of functionality I want to show you that's brand new is something we call command buttons. And we may end up renaming this when we figure out a somewhat better thing to call it. But the idea is, in the past, we've had this widget over here, which is called the Create Content widget, that lets you add different types of nodes to your site. If I customize this page, and we go down here to this content creation widget, I can go to this and I can select what types of content I want to add. So, for example, I can say, let's add events or something like that. We can say finish and save. And now we should have a create event button. This updates our slow site. There we go. Okay, so now we have an add event button. So, I mean, that's been great for kind of just really basic content creation. But one of the problems that you'll have probably noticed if you played with it is there's currently no way to reorder these buttons. You can't like drag and drop them into different orders. And you also can't really customize the links that appear here if you want to do something a little bit more special and customized. So we're going to toss out this content creation widget, and it's going to get replaced with something new called command buttons. So command buttons are, we've created a new entity called command buttons. So they're over here in your structure menu. So this is something typically your site admin is going to create for you. This is using the entity API. So here we have a single, if you know the Drupal kind of jargon, we currently have a single bundle of this entity called command button. You can create additional bundles of buttons. These are entities, so they're fieldable. You could add your own fields to them and kind of do other custom stuff, which I think provides a lot of really interesting, cool possibilities for module developers. But in this case, Atrium just ships with one bundle to start with called command button. So let's go ahead and list our command buttons. Right now I've created two on the site. I've created one called user profile and one called create event. If I view one of these, the user profile button, let's edit that actually. So what a button is, just what a command button is, it's just a caption and a link. That's all it is. So in this case, I've got a button with a caption called user profile, and here's my link over here, user slash, and then you'll see a token slash edit. So that's kind of the key piece of functionality here, is it allows you to create these buttons and use tokens in the URL. And down here you can expand the token list as normal, and look at what all the tokens are that are available on your system. So in this case, this is going to give us a button that lets you edit the current user's profile. And the path for that is user slash the user ID slash edit. That's something you normally couldn't hard code, because that user ID number is going to change depending on who's logged into the site. So that would normally be something you'd have to create dynamically in code. For example, in Atrium itself, up here, when you click on your user badge, it has an edit link to go to your user profile. And this is being created kind of programmatically because it has to fill in your user ID. But now you can have your own command buttons that do this yourself. In my other button here, I just made a create event button. If we edit this button, you'll see that it just says create event, and all it does is go to node slash add slash away event. And this is the normal link that you have in Drupal for creating content. If you went to the content page and went to the add content and you looked at the link for adding an event, excuse me, this is the link that it would show. But for example, on sometimes you have sites where you've customized your content types, and maybe you want to pass some arguments to this page. So I want to say, I'm going to give it some kind of default, today or something like that. You might have implemented some functionality that looks for this URL parameter and does something special with it. And with the previous module, you couldn't add any kind of custom fields to this. The other thing that we can do is we support, since we're using the Bootstrap framework, CSS framework for our theme in Atrium, one of the things that's nice that comes with Bootstrap is a whole bunch of icons. So these buttons actually support full icons. So in this case, I've scrolled down. You see there's a whole bunch of icons. We'll probably eventually format this list so it's not just one column like this, so it's not quite so long. But for now, that's what we have. And one of the icons that I found here was the icon calendar that kind of looks like a calendar. So I saved that with my button. So after you create all these buttons, how do you use them? So the idea is that your site admin is going to create a bunch of buttons for your site. Atrium itself very soon is going to automatically create buttons for creating each of your content types. So just adding a content type will automatically add a command button to create that type for you. So you get kind of all those for free. And then any other buttons you want, like, that user profile, or if you want to go and set the icons for buttons, you'll have to do that manually as the site admin. But once your site admin gets all these buttons configured for you, now as the space owner, you can add these buttons to your space or your section or anywhere else that you can put a widget. So we're going to say customize this page, and we're going to add a widget. Now this time the widget isn't up here in one of these sub-tabs. It's listed down here as a command list. So it's another one of these top level widgets, like the ones that come with Panoply. So it's just a different kind. It's very similar to add links, but instead of creating simple links, we're going to add command buttons. So we click add command list. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set what style. These are all the Bootstrap styles for buttons, and I'll show you how these work in a second. Let's just set the primary, and we're going to set the default button size. And now let's add some command buttons. So we had that user profile button, so we start typing and it finds it for us. So we'll put that there. We'll say add another. This is your typical multi-value, entity reference field, right? So we'll say create, and it will find create event for us. So now we've got user profile and create event, and you can see they're being previewed up here. And you can see there's the little icon that we selected for our create event button. And now what these button styles do is just kind of change your colors. So, warning is that color, success is green. So you can look up on the Bootstrap CSS site to see what these different styles do. You can make them full width, in which case they're going to span the full width of your widget. You can also make them use drop downs. So we're just going to save this now and save our page. And now you can see the command buttons are already appearing over here on the site. So now we're going to use those instead of these down here. Instead of adding an event, we're going to create an event with this button, and you can see it's going to take us to the create event page. All right, so this now gives you these commands. You can drag and drop them in a different order. You can set the button colors. You can add button icons, all sorts of cool new functionality that we didn't have before. So that's buttons. So I think that's probably it. That's a lot more than I thought we would have time to show here, but that's pretty much all the new functionality that we've put in Atrium in the last couple of weeks since DrupalCon. So now in our 10 to 15 minutes we have left here, I want to start opening it up for questions. So if you go to your GoToMeeting, you can post questions, and I'm going to start taking a look at those. It looks like some people have already started. So let's see. Rob Montero said first just yes, that's fine. Then says, is it because the date passed? Yeah. So Rob gets the points for figuring out why my upcoming events wasn't showing up originally. Karen says, yeah, I cannot be appearing at the date. David says, great stuff. Sorry, I had to run early. Oh, I'm sorry that you had to go, David. He's been one of our great contributors out there in Drupal.org land. So anybody else have any other, any other questions? Just post to the questions section in your GoToMeeting. Or if you want to actually talk, that's more complicated, just go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you. And I can unmute you and we can have a conversation. Let's see, Antonio says, Antonio has a very excellent question. What about the PRL module? Here's someone who has a good understanding of what's in Atrium 1, who sees something missing in Atrium 2. Actually, you're correct, Antonio. The PRL module is still on our to-do list before we have a beta. We've done some initial testing and it looks like it works okay. So we're just going to do some final testing to make sure that that works out okay. What the PURL module does, for people that don't know, is it lets you actually change the entire domain name in your URL on a per space basis. So for example, in our demo here, we could make the physics department show up as, physics.university.com instead of university.com/physics like the URL is currently. So yes, we fully intend to support PURL and have that in the Atrium 2 beta. Let's see. Michael says the geofield module sounds cool. Did you post the patch you built for translating the location? So the way this works is you set up a geofield and you tell it that you want to get that from another field, and then you point it to your WYSIWYG field. In this case, that was the location field. So it's already built into geofield or it's either geofield or geocoder. I get those two mixed up because I use them both together. But when you add, I believe it's when you add the geofield. Yeah, it's when you add the geofield to your node, you can tell it to pull the data from another field. So that's already in there. The part that we had to patch was to support adding that break line so that it only parses the stuff above the break line. The way that was done is we didn't really patch the module itself for that directly. We patched we just added an alter hook. So up in Atrium events, there's this, and hopefully you can see the code screen here. So we just added an alter hook to the geocoder module so that it would call this, and then in Atrium, we do a bunch of search and replaces. So in this case, the very first rule is basically ignore everything after the break. We also ignore everything within, we strip out the script tags, we strip out HTML tags, we fix multi-line comments. So we kind of do all of this in a global preg replace so that it alters what the geocode is actually parsing. So we decided to do it in this more general way so that just, as a contrib module, any module might want to alter that differently than what we do in Atrium. So we didn't really want to put this itself into geocoder. So we just have that in Atrium. But you could certainly copy and paste this into your own module if you need that. Let's see, Ben Holt says, where were the third-party case tracker modules you mentioned earlier? So on the Open Atrium project page on Drupal.org, we have a section down here called Other Modules that work with Open Atrium 2. And here is the Open Atrium 2 work tracker link. And that will take you to David's page on the work tracker. So feel free to install that and play with it. The other new thing I should mention, by the way, some people have asked about theming. We've got some contributions also. I think this is also David, if I'm not, yep, David. He has started a new 7.x branch to the Ginkgo theme. So if you were really fond of the Ginkgo theme in Atrium 1, you can go give the new version a try for Atrium 2 as well. So we'll keep this updated. If you know of somebody that's doing a module that works with Atrium 2, let me know and I'll add it. I'll also be adding some of these others that are part of OG, like that OG variables module. Another new one that I'm not going to have time to talk about today, but feel free to start taking a look at, is we have a module out there called OA_LDAP, which is the LDAP integration for Open Atrium. We're not going to be shipping that as part of the core, but it's going to be available as a plugin module that you can just add to your site, probably eventually as an app as well on some app server. It lets you attach LDAP groups to your Atrium groups and spaces so that that membership can be controlled by LDAP instead of locally on your Drupal site. But in any case, we'll be posting links to those modules. So you can always go to the Open Atrium project page to get kind of the latest on that. Let's see, Michael asks, what module exists for command buttons? So Michael, the module for that is currently within OA right now. It's called OA buttons. We intend this to be a bit more general purpose than just OA. As you've seen, since it's a general entity, it's something that's potentially useful for sites even outside of Open Atrium. So we're trying to figure out a good name for that. We might still end up calling it OA buttons, even though it doesn't require OA. But I kind of think that's a little odd. I'd rather have a more generic name for it. We might call it command buttons or something like that. But so we are definitely in the process of getting that put out as a separate project. So again, it will be linked. If it's a separate project, it'll be linked from the Atrium page here. John asks, is there an upgrade path from OA1? That's a frequently asked question that we've covered in some other webinars, and I talked pretty extensively about at DrupalCon. I'm sorry to report that we did not solve the complicated problem of upgrading D6 sites into D7. Upgrading Drupal 6 to Drupal 7 is a very complex issue. It goes way beyond Open Atrium. There is no single-click solution for that. With that said, what we are still working on are some migrate module scripts that would help you migrate your data. So for the 3 core plugins with migrating your old blogs into discussions, migrating your old notebooks into wiki, and migrating your old events into the new events, we will be posting some migrate scripts eventually for that, and eventually, means sometime this summer. We haven't actually started our own data migration on that yet, but we're going to be getting into that here at Phase 2 because we use Open Atrium 1 internally quite a bit, and we want to migrate all of our Open Atrium 1 stuff to Open Atrium 2 as well. So we're going to be getting more experience for that. But just to set expectations, again, it's going to be something that you're going to probably need some Drupal knowledge of, probably need to, if you're not a Drupal shop, probably hire someone, not necessarily Phase 2. There's going to be a lot of smaller Drupal shops out there that could help you migrate your D6 site for that. But it really depends a lot on how you customize it, and specifically things like the fact that we switched to using panels. If you've done any kind of customization of your group layout in Open Atrium 1, none of that's going to come across. There's no way to migrate that from context and spaces into the new panels system. So you're going to have to recreate any of your layouts manually. Let's see, Antonio says, great, yes, I've also used with OG and D7, looks okay. Kevin, would OA's default UI handle 100 spaces well as is? Yes. So Kevin, performance is something that we're going to be focusing on during beta. So for alpha, we've been worried about getting the actual functionality built. Right now, I can tell you I do testing on a regular basis with a dev site. In fact, that's kind of why my dev site was a little slow today, is I've got a dev site with hundreds of spaces and thousands of users and thousands of content posts and things like that. As I mentioned at DrupalCon, and I'll mention again today, Phase 2, we're actually internally here building a client site for a internal or for a government health IT organization that is built on Atrium 2. That site launches internally to them in mid-July, so just about a month from now. So obviously they don't want their site to be based on alpha code, which means you'll see a beta before mid-July. But it's also a site that needs to be performant. They have thousands of users on their site, and so they need Atrium 2 to be able to support thousands of users, not, of course, thousands of simultaneous logged in users, but typically we're focused on less than 100 logged in users being something easily handled out of the box by Atrium 2. So we are very concerned about performance. When we did the access control, we've already done a fair amount of performance testing on that. And all of the new access control in Atrium is very fast and very performant with the grant system. Since we've added some new modules, things like the calendar module, you'll always still have issues with certain contrib modules. I know, for example, with calendar, that if you create a lot of recurring events, the calendar display becomes very slow. So you'll want to make sure that you don't put that calendar display, for example, on your site's homepage or something like that if you're doing a lot of repeating events. Those are issues with the actual modules that we don't have really any control over. But for the Atrium core stuff, we're definitely looking at performance. Let's see, Karen says, lack of an obvious standard file system prohibited me from further exploring Atrium 1 as an alternative to SharePoint. I know you mentioned some cool Google Drive customizations with OG variables. Is there a core contrib file system that's a bit more OA Drupal native, or will it be Google Drive, or what else? Okay, so basically, to summarize Karen's question, I think this is what about document management, right? And correct me, Karen, if that's not quite exactly what you mean here, but trying to generalize this for everybody. Document management is another one of these big problems. that is going to have a lot of solutions to it, really depend on your needs. So in Atrium, all we have right now is the wiki plugin. We do have full media support with file attachments, and there's another demo out here on Atrium that you can look at for looking at that in more detail to see how that works. So the media integration kind of provides much better file system support than Atrium 1 had. So Atrium 2 out of the box might already do what you need. If you need to store your files elsewhere, if you don't want to use the local file system, then you need to look at a bigger solution. And we talk about Atrium being an integration toolkit. You know, Atrium works with your systems. It's not an either-or situation. So I mentioned Google Drive briefly as something that somebody could write a plugin for that would show your Google Drive files in an Atrium space. That's something that we're looking into. We have not finished writing that yet. It's not out there available yet. You might be able to take an existing Drupal module and make it into an OA plugin. That's actually relatively easy to do. And one of the previous webinars talked a little bit about how to do that and where the documentation is for making plugins. But for example, if you've got a big organization, you know, you're probably using something like Alfresco for your document management needs, because you know that's where you have, you know, the full version controlling, the full workflow system, you know, all of that kind of stuff, being able to check in and check out documents and share edit them and those kinds of things. So again, there's that would be something you'd have a plugin for with Atrium. So Atrium's not going to support it out of the box. But again, making these plugins for any Drupal developers out there is a pretty straightforward thing to do. We had a hackathon at DrupalCon, and we started working on some things like Jira integrations and Google Docs integrations. And in just a few hours, we were able to make a large amount of progress on those things. And you'll eventually see those as apps in Atrium. But if you want to go ahead and work on Alfresco integrations, you know, I'd be happy to link to the Atrium page for that. So the answer, I guess, Kieran, is short term right now, Atrium 2 is much better than Atrium 1 in terms of supporting the local file system. And if you want to go beyond that with Google Drive or Microsoft SkyDrive or Alfresco, you'll be looking for plugins for that from contributed people. Okay, Michael says, will it be possible to move content from OA1 to OA2? I think I covered that. The next Michael says, you said at DrupalCon that you thought we'd see a beta around midsummer. Is that still the case? Yep, that's still the case. We're still launching our healthcare site on July 10th internally to them. So you'll see a beta before July 10th. And we hope to have we'll have another webinar scheduled to talk about the beta and beyond in a week or two. Let's see, back to the other Brian. Will it be possible to rename features in OA2 so I can call Wiki or Spaces something different? This is something we talked about early on in the Atrium architecture, because especially with spaces and groups and sections, like that terminology was really kind of cumbersome, and we did the best we could trying to pick some things, some terms that were consistent and made sense once you understood them. But in terms of renaming them, we found that this is actually very difficult. For specifically, when you get to renaming groups, there's a lot of groups hard-coded into the organic groups module. I've attempted to fix some of them in Atrium so that when you're on a space page, it tells you you're on a space instead of a group. But kind of as soon as you go one layer deep into the admin UI, you'll start seeing that it says groups again, because there's just a lot of stuff hard-coded in organic groups for that. So in Atrium, we don't actually call things a wiki per se, in the sense that the content type is called a wiki, or it's an OA_wiki. But using those command buttons, you know, this is where you get kind of that flexibility of the command buttons. Instead of saying create wiki, you can have it say create document or create publication or something like that. So you can rename that command button to something else. In your views, where it shows you, you know, recent activity, it's not going to say recent wikis. It actually just says recent content or recent news, and all of those titles are changeable. So I think a lot of stuff is changeable, but there isn't some global taxonomy to change things at a global level like we originally kind of hoped. And so, you know, I again welcome people if you want to submit patches to improve that. That'd be great. But I think right now, out of the box, Atrium, you're going to see that we have spaces, groups, and sections, and that's just what they're going to be called for now. Let's see, then Kieran says, yeah, that's it for document management. Okay, good. So I'm glad I covered that. So that's the questions, and we're now at an hour. So I think I'm going to close it up unless anyone has a really pressing question or need here at the end. Thanks everyone for listening. We are going to continue having these as we have new functionality to show. So it's not going to be weekly like it was before DrupalCon, because I'm trying to get this other site launched in July, as you can imagine, which is taking a lot of time. But you'll definitely see some more webinars from us on this. Keep an eye on the project page. Keep an eye on our blogs. And if you aren't already on our mailing list, I'll switch over here really quick to my last how to contribute slide. Let's see, where'd that go? There we go. So you can connect with us, the Open Atrium at phase2technology.com. That's the email list. So email us there, and I see that, and a bunch of our people here see that and can get you added. On IRC, there's a hash Open Atrium channel. Honestly, I'm in there sometimes, but I tend to be pretty distracted. So if you're reporting bugs or things, I'd rather have you post the issue into the Atrium issue queue. And then we have a Twitter at Open Atrium, and that's where we announce webinars and various events like this. So that's it for today. Thanks everybody for attending. I appreciate it. And we'll see you at the next one. Goodbye.